everyone. I hope you all had a great start to your new year. So today we're going to talk about a subject that has gotten a lot of attention in the media lately, and this is a subject of sudden death. So basically, there's a seeming rise in a condition known as sudden adult death syndrome, at least a seeming rise in the conversation surrounding it. And so I think it's really important that we understand what exactly it is and, what does it mean for us today. So basically, it seems like there may be more young people who are collapsing and dying suddenly. And this was seen tragically in one of the most high-profile cases surrounding a football player known as Damar Hamlin. Now, the reasons behind this are still unknown, although there are some physicians that are, using their expert opinion to inform us that this might be a condition known as comedocortis. So basically, this is a condition that happens due to blunt force trauma to the chest, and so this induces an abnormal heart rhythm, which basically throws the heart out of whack and can induce a heart attack or sudden cardiac arrest rather. So thankfully, he is alive and is doing much better and is responsive. So of course, let's continue to keep him in prayer and also his family in prayer. However, although this was the highest profile case where a sudden collapse has occurred, unfortunately this is not the only case that this has happened. And in fact, over the past year, a lot of other athletes have collapsed suddenly, and unfortunately the way their cases turned out was not as positive as the way Damar Hamlin's has turned out so far. So what we're going to do is talk about those today, as well as what may be a potential contributing factor. So we're hearing from some physicians, including an esteemed cardiologist known as Dr. Peter McCullough, that over the past year, 1,598 athletes suffered from cardiac arrest, of which 1,101 were fatal, compared to over a 38-year period from 1966 to 2004. There were 1,101 athletes under 35 years old that suffered cardiac arrest. This trend, if indeed true, illustrates that there may be a deeper problem than just what we have heard last week. And this is something that we do definitely need to address. Not only is this a problem affecting adult athletes, but this has also occurred with teenage athletes and in populations around the world. The problem has gotten to the point where in Melbourne, Australia, they are installing defibrillators in each home because of the need to resuscitate their population due to sudden cardiac arrests occurring. And actually, what is also fascinating is that the life insurance industry has reported a 40% rise among deaths in the working age recently, which is troubling because they are saying this is basically an unheard of occurrence. And so you might ask why this is becoming more of a topic of discussion and why we are hearing about this more often. At this point, I don't think that anyone really has any definitive answers. However, we of course will need them as sudden cardiac arrest is becoming more of an issue for younger age groups, particularly athletes, and we need to potentially consider putting in protections in place if appropriate. So of course we might have heard of different reasons. Maybe during the COVID-19 pandemic, people didn't have, access to the healthcare resources that they normally would have. So maybe that could be a contributing factor, or maybe there's something unknown. However, I want to briefly discuss what I believe may be a contributing factor in some of these deaths, which I do not believe is being adequately discussed. I want to make it clear that at this point, there is no definitive evidence but there is definitely a need for more research in this area. And so also at this point, I would just like to give a quick disclaimer, which will also be included in the comments below, that I am not a physician, so I am not giving any medical advice. So if you need medical advice, contact your primary care physician, but this video is for informational purposes only. So sudden adult death syndrome, also known as SADS, is a condition where the heart, typically for those under the age of 40, suddenly stops pumping. It is said that this is due to abnormalities in the electrical activity of your heart, which is linked to genetic conditions, family history, obesity, and prior cardiac events. With this being said, my personal opinion is that the COVID vaccines need to be investigated as a potential contributor to sudden cardiac arrest. So I am not saying that this is the only factor, as there could be several factors, as I have mentioned previously. However, what I have noticed is that there is an unwillingness to even consider the COVID vaccines as something that could potentially cause injury, when the reality is that all medical products, including COVID vaccines, have the potential for injury, and that they have their own risk-benefit profile that changes based on the person's personal medical status. So today, I will be discussing 5 reasons why I believe that the COVID vaccines should be investigated as a potential contributor to the sudden deaths that we are seeing. So the first reason that I will discuss is the widespread exposure. So given that billions of people have been exposed to this technology, it is important to have a thorough investigation to determine if there is a causal association between the administration of this technology and the sudden deaths that we are seeing. It's not good enough to say that we don't have any evidence to prove it and just move on. We need an unbiased investigation to dig into these cases to determine what exactly is causing this, and to not rule out anything until we know without a shadow of a doubt what is causing this. So given that the COVID vaccines are a new exposure that many people have in common, it would be most logical to start looking into this first. And of course, I also understand that sudden death has existed before the COVID vaccines have rolled out. However, given that some physicians were pointing out that sudden deaths have become more common during the rollout, and of course we have life insurance agencies that are reporting astronomical deaths, I think this is important that we actually take a deeper look into this. Now, number 2 is the fact that it was an experimental product at the time of its rollout. So at the time when most people received these products, they were still in the experimental stages. They were released on 2 months worth of data, where healthy people over 16 years old were included in the initial trials, which excluded pregnant women. For the 6-month study, Pfizer unblinded their participants and offered them the vaccine, which bias their results and will make it more difficult to tell moving forward what the true outcomes of their clinical trial are. So essentially, unless Pfizer has, re-enrolled a new cohort, we won't have any reliable data past 6 months. So number 3 is the mechanism of action. So my personal opinion is that this product was inappropriately marketed as a vaccine and should have been marketed as a gene-based therapy. So traditional vaccines are weakened or killed pathogens that are injected into your body, which is supposed to induce an immune response and confer immunity. However, COVID vaccines rely on novel gene products and lipid nanoparticle technology, which can use your cell's machinery to code for pathogenic spike proteins, causing your body to attack your own cells presenting these proteins. And of course, it's important to note at this point that we also know that these do not confer immunity, however, are said to lower or reduce your symptoms that you might experience after being infected. This is particularly a risky method of trying to induce a form of protection, given that lipid nanoparticles have the potential to spread throughout the body, particularly if they're injected into a blood vessel, which is like a superhighway to the rest of your body's organs. So wherever these particles land, they can potentially code. For example, if the cells in your if the cells in your heart take up the nanoparticles, your heart cells will create the spike protein. So your immune system, of course, which does not like foreign particles, will be stimulated to attack these cells, creating these proteins, which unfortunately may be your own heart tissue. So essentially it might induce an attack against your own tissue. So number 4 is unknown risks of ingredients. So it's difficult to generate a safety profile for any therapeutic or medical device based on 2 months of clinical trial data. Given that this is the first time that gene-based products are being used so widely in a population irrespective of health status, there's still much that we do not know about how this will work out. So some things to keep in mind is that mRNA is unstable, which is why it is stored in minus 80 degrees Celsius. At least that's how it was stored initially. And so this is a temperature that biomedical scientists typically use to keep genes stable when we want to transfect cells with that gene, or essentially insert foreign genes into eukaryotic cells, which is what all of us have. It is concerning that this temperature was no longer used, indicating a potential degradation in the mRNA products used and a potential shift in the safety profile. So the BMJ actually reported that there was 55% purity in some of the gene-based products that were administered to people. So it is concerning because this indicates that there is potential that there are unknown and uncharacterized proteins that are being created in the human body for which we do not have a safety profile. We do not yet understand the long-term effects of forcing the human body to create pathogenic proteins and causing this to happen periodically. We do not know the effects of ingredients such as SM-102 in the human body. Looking at the safety data sheets, it indicates that toxicity was characterized for swallowing on the skin and eye irritation, but the injection toxicity is not characterized according to the Cayman website. And this website indicates that this product is being used to develop the lipid nanoparticles for mRNA-based vaccines. So it's also important to note that for the exposure pathways that were characterized, it indicated toxicity if swallowed, skin irritation, and eye irritation. And they also indicated that this product is not intended to be for human or veterinary use. So essentially it is concerning that this has been used in the human body, and yet we do not have good enough safety data for this. So it's important to keep in mind that the injection pathway is one of the most risky pathways to introduce a therapeutic because there are not as many protection against acute toxicity as there are if something is introduced orally, dermally, or via inhalation. So if something is introduced orally, you have enzymes to potentially break it down. You, of course, have the ability to vomit. If it's introduced dermally, of course, your skin protects the rest of your body from essentially introducing a potentially dangerous exposure to your bloodstream. And inhalation, of course, you can sneeze, you can cough. In order to get rid of that, you have nose hairs that protect you from certain particles. But in the injection pathway, as I mentioned before, essentially it's going into your bloodstream and it has access to the rest of your organs from there. I also wanted to point out that lipid nanoparticles can have therapeutic potential by themselves, so essentially without loading them with any mRNA or any other drug. And their small size as well as surface chemistry may also introduce risks that we cannot characterize until we have data. So essentially there are certain materials that change their properties based on their size, and this is also true in the case of nanoparticles. So we have not properly characterized that yet, so we'll have to wait to see what the safety data on this really looks like in the coming months and years. So the last thing is increased myocarditis risk. So I won't go into too much detail about this, but we are all aware that the COVID gene injections may increase the risk of myocarditis, particularly in young men. So myocarditis has been linked to sudden death, and I do have the sources for this video in the description below, so you can check it out. You can read it for yourself, and you can determine, what I'm saying is true, and ultimately come to your own conclusions regarding what the appropriate steps for you to take are moving forward. So the point of this video is that we need to take into account all possible exposures, which may be leading young people to experience sudden cardiac arrest. We owe it to society to have an honest discussion about all potential causes of this phenomena, including the COVID vaccines, and not shut down conversations because it might be uncomfortable to have. I personally believe that we need to take a closer look at the COVID vaccines, given the unknown potential causes of injury surrounding this technology, and seriously consider the policies and mandates surrounding this issue that may be unnecessarily putting the lives of people at risk. So that will be the end of this video, and of course I encourage you all to continue to discuss and really have these difficult conversations, because I believe that they will be important in the months and years to come. So thank you all for listening, and I hope you all have a good week, and I'll see you in the next video.